They said a man could ride west and buy himself a future. But Elias Hart rode into the fog of Montana territory carrying a deed, a pistol, and a heart too tired to care who he hurt. At the end of that trail stood a dying farmer and his daughter who would trade everything to save him. He came to take their land. She offered herself instead, whispering only, "Just spare him." Was it the land he'd claim, or the love that would claim him? Let's find out.
Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful stories coming every single day, and you don't want to miss them. Now, let's begin.
The wind rolled low across the Montana hills, dragging fog through the grass like ghost hands, searching for something lost. Elias Hart rode slow through it, coat heavy with dust and old rain, the steady rhythm of his horse the only sound in miles. His breath fogged in the cold dawn. A folded deed pressed against his chest. 80 acres of wild earth signed and sealed in Helena, promised to him by law and ink. He had fought in a war that taught him one thing. Paper and bullets both carried weight, and both could destroy a man just the same. Ahead, the land sloped into a narrow valley, where a crooked fence ran half-broken through the mist. The boards leaned like old bones. Beyond them, smoke curled from a single chimney. The Boone place, just where the map said it would be. Elias slowed, pulling the reins until the horse huffed against the cold. The cabin stood alone, its porch shadowed, its silence louder than any warning. He felt it then. Not fear, exactly, but the uneasy knowledge that this ride would not end with signatures or clean law. A shape moved beyond the fence, small, still, watching. Elias touched the brim of his hat, more out of habit than respect, and whispered to himself, "Let's get this done." He nudged the horse forward, into the fog thick as breath. Would you ride into the mist, knowing you might destroy someone's home? Or save it? Let's find out. The fog thinned as Elias neared the cabin. Boards creaked under his horse's hooves, and the faint sound of a chicken startled somewhere in the yard. He reined in at the fence line, a rough border, hand-built and stubborn. Smoke from the chimney trailed in the pale light, curling like a warning against the sky. Then he saw her. A young woman stood on the porch, one hand resting on a rifle propped against the post. Her hair was dark chestnut, half loosed from its braid, and her dress had the worn softness of years of work. The fog wrapped around her like the land itself, refusing to let her go. Elias touched his hat. "Morning, ma'am. I'm looking for Silas Boone. This is his claim?" Her eyes met his, steady, fierce, rimmed red from sleepless nights. "It is?" "I've business with him," Elias said, dismounting. His boots sank into the thawing mud. Her voice came quiet but sharp. "He's sick." A pause, then, lower still, trembling at the edge of courage. "Please, take me instead. Just spare him." The words hit harder than any bullet. Elias froze. She didn't look away. No pleading. Just the raw, desperate strength of someone with nothing left to bargain but herself. He swallowed, suddenly unsure of everything the paper in his coat claimed to own. The wind shifted. A shutter banged once, then silence. Would you believe the law in your pocket, or the fear in her eyes? Let's find out. Elias stood motionless at the fence as her words sank in. "Take me instead. Spare him." They echoed like the creak of an empty church pew, hollow yet holy. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. The young woman's gaze didn't waver. From inside the cabin came a cough, deep, ragged, the kind that told of long winters and harder work. Without waiting, she turned and pushed the door open. The sound of it, hinges straining, wood complaining, seemed to swallow the distance between pity and duty. Elias followed, leaving his horse tied to a leaning post. Inside smelled of pine smoke, boiled roots, and medicine that hadn't worked. The room was small, the walls packed with rough logs sealed by clay. On a cot near the hearth lay a man whose face looked carved from the same land he'd tried to tame. Silas Boone. His beard was gray, his skin pale beneath the soot. Every breath sounded like it cost him another day. Clara knelt beside him, wringing a cloth, her movements quick but tender. "Pa, there's a man here," she said softly. Silas opened one eye, cloudy and sharp at once. "Government?" he rasped. Elias shook his head. "Just a man with a paper." "Paper's all they need to steal a lifetime's work," Silas said, coughing until his hand shook. Elias looked at the cracked ceiling, the broken tools stacked by the hearth, the tired girl holding this world together with her bare hands. He felt the folded deed burn in his pocket like a brand. For the first time, he wondered if the law was ever meant for men like Silas Boone, or if it was made to bury them. Clara pressed her father's hand and whispered, "Please, just rest." Outside, the wind pressed against the door as if the land itself wanted to listen. Night crept down the valley like ink spilled across parchment. Elias's campfire burned low on the far side of the property line, just beyond the Boone fence. The sky above was wide and star-dusted, so open it made a man feel smaller than he cared to admit. He sat on a rough log, hat low, listening to the creek whisper through the grass. Hoofbeats didn't bring her. Silence did. Clara Boone stepped out of the dark, carrying a tin plate wrapped in cloth. Her boots scuffed the dirt as she stopped near the firelight. Elias rose instinctively. "I thought you might be hungry," she said. He nodded, taking the plate. "You didn't have to." "I know," she answered simply, gaze fixed on the flames. "But it's what we do out here. Feed even the ones who come to take from us." Elias set the food aside, staring into the fire. The light danced against her face, half shadow, half courage. "You think I came to take," he said quietly. "But I bought this land by the law." She looked at him then, eyes sharp as flint. "And my father built it with his hands. Which one do you think will last longer?" The fire cracked, throwing sparks into the black sky. Elias didn't answer. He wanted to tell her he hadn't meant harm, that the law wasn't supposed to be cruel. But the words stuck. Clara turned to leave, her voice soft but certain. "Good men don't hide behind papers, Mr. Hart. They stand beside the people they're taking from." She vanished into the dark. The fire hissed in the silence she left behind, and Elias felt the first tremor of doubt stir in his chest, like an ember that refused to die. The next afternoon, dust rose on the main road into Boone's Crossing. A polished wagon rolled into town, pulled by two bay horses too fine for this kind of country. Behind the reins sat Martin Hart, Elias's cousin, his coat city black and spotless, his smile even cleaner. The kind of man who could make a lie sound like business. Elias watched from the porch of the supply store as Martin stepped down, boots gleaming. "Well, well," Martin drawled, tipping his hat. "Didn't think I'd have to ride all the way out here to remind you what you owe me." Elias's jaw tightened. I didn't forget. I just haven't signed anyone off the land yet. Martin's laugh was quick and sharp. You mean that old Boone fella and his girl? Elias, the man's a squatter. The deed's yours. You do the job and we flip this parcel to the rail company before winter. That's how we make profit, cousin. Not pity. Elias looked toward the ridge, where the Boone cabin sat like a stubborn scar against the horizon. They've got nowhere else, he said. Martin smirked. Not your problem. You want a heart, buy one at the church. This, he tapped Elias's chest right where the deed lay hidden, this is business. The words landed heavier than the pistol on Elias's hip. He'd heard sermons about right and wrong, but never from a man who'd never lifted a shovel. Martin dusted his gloves, glancing toward the saloon. I'll stay a few nights, maybe help you remember what you came for. Elias said nothing, but as his cousin walked away, he felt a cold weight settle in his gut. Somewhere beyond the town's edge, the fog had burned off, but for Elias Hart, the world was only getting darker. The days turned mean after Martin arrived. The air itself seemed sharper, the silence heavier. One morning, Clara found the pasture fence split clean through, rails torn down, the posts hacked at their base. Cattle had wandered off, frightened and scattered. Elias was there by noon, jaw set, hat pulled low. He walked the line in silence, boots crunching over broken wood. This wasn't the wind, he muttered. Clara stood behind him, arms wrapped tight around herself. They're sending a message. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but fury. Later, Elias found the field salted. White dust spread over the earth like frost, killing whatever roots dared rise. He crouched, ran his hand through it, then looked toward town. Martin, he said under his breath. Clara's eyes met his. So it's true. You came to take from us, and now your own want to finish it. He had no defense, just the hollow ache of shame. The law he'd trusted now felt like a weapon pointed at both of them. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, Clara's father coughed inside the cabin, each breath pulling harder than the last. Elias turned from the fence, the shadows cutting his face in half. I'll fix this, he said. Clara's reply was a whisper carried on the wind. Then start by standing with us, not against us. He looked at her, and for the first time the deed in his pocket felt like sin. When the law becomes the weapon, who stands for what's right? Don't look away. The storm rolled in fast that night, black clouds boiling over the ridge like smoke from some old war. Rain hammered the cabin roof, leaking through cracks Clara had patched a dozen times before. Elias had stayed close. His camp moved near the porch in case trouble came again. Inside, Silas Boone struggled to rise from his cot, determined to brace a window that the wind kept slamming open. "Pa, let it be," Clara pleaded, pressing him back. But pride was a hard thing to bury. "I built this house," he rasped. "It won't fall while I'm still breathing." The next gust hit, and with it came a snap, the frame giving way. Silas staggered forward, hammer in hand, then collapsed as if the wind itself had struck him down. Clara screamed. Elias burst through the door, lightning flashing behind him, and caught the old man before he hit the floor. Silas's breath came thin, shallow. His skin had gone gray. "Lay him down," Clara whispered, tears blurring her words. Elias did, his hands trembling as if he were holding more than a man. as if he were holding the cost of every choice he'd made. Silas's eyes flickered open. "You came here to take," he whispered, voice barely air. "But maybe you'll stay to give." Then his head fell back against the pillow, the storm still roaring around them. Elias stayed kneeling beside the bed long after, the thunder shaking the walls, the guilt pounding louder than the rain. Outside, the wind dragged through the valley, cold and endless, as if the land itself was mourning too. By morning, the storm had passed, but the air still carried the taste of thunder. Elias rode into Boone's Crossing with mud on his boots and anger burning in his chest. The streets were quiet, until he saw them. Martin Hart stood outside the saloon with two hired men, laughing, a silver flask glinting in his hand. "Well, there's my noble cousin," he called, voice slick with mockery. "Did the farmer's daughter finally thank you for saving her shack?" Elias swung off his horse without a word. The onlookers, blacksmith, storekeep, a few miners, watched from under the awnings. Elias walked straight up to Martin. "You sent men to that farm," Elias said. His voice was low, even, but it carried. Martin smirked. "I sent men to my land." The punch came fast. Elias's fist cracked against Martin's jaw, sending him sprawling into the mud. The hired men stepped forward, but the sheriff's shotgun leveled before they could move. "That's enough," the sheriff barked. "We don't spill blood over greed in this town." Martin wiped his mouth, eyes burning. "You'll regret this, Elias. You're throwing away a fortune for a dying man and his girl." Elias stared him down, rainwater dripping from his hat brim. "Then I'll live poor and right." The crowd murmured. The sheriff turned his gun aside, but no one missed the message. Elias Hart wasn't riding for business anymore. As Martin limped away, the townsfolk stepped back into their doorways, whispering about the man who'd just chosen honor over profit. Think that's the end of it? Every victory in the West comes with a price. The days after the fight came bright and still, the kind of days that make the world feel half forgiven. The air was clean again, carrying the smell of thawed earth and smoke from a mended chimney. Elias rode back to the Boone Ridge with the first light, a hammer and post-hole digger strapped behind his saddle. Clara was already in the field, her hair loose, skirts damp with dew. She looked up as he dismounted, no fear left in her eyes, only wary curiosity. "You here to finish the job?" she asked. "Something like that," Elias said. He set down his tools, knelt in the dirt, and drove the first stake. "I'm marking a new line." She frowned. "The boundary's already drawn." "Not anymore," he nodded toward the rise. "Half for your father, half for me. The papers can say what they please. This is how it stands now." Clara watched him work, sweat and soil streaking his hands. For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then her voice softened. He'd have liked that. He always said land's only worth what a man's willing to share. They worked together until the sun hung low, laying post after post in quiet rhythm. The creek murmured nearby, the sky burned gold. When the last stake was set, Elias leaned on his shovel, breath heavy. "It's yours as long as you want it," he said. Clara met his gaze. "Then I reckon we'll keep it standing, together." For the first time, Elias smiled without guilt. The land no longer felt like a claim, it felt like home. Evening crept softly over the ridge, painting the cabin in amber light. Inside, the fire whispered and popped, throwing warm shadows across the walls. Silas Boone slept soundly for the first time in weeks, his breath slow, steady. Clara sat by the hearth, sewing something small and delicate. Elias lingered at the doorway, hat in hand. "Didn't mean to intrude," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "You're not intruding. You're part of this place now, whether you like it or not." He chuckled, low and uneasy. "Never thought I'd find peace on land I came to steal." Clara set her needle aside and rose. In her hands was a square of faded green cloth, edges embroidered with clumsy stitches. "My mother made this," she said, voice soft as a hymn. "She told me to give it to a man who keeps his dignity when no one would blame him for losing it." Elias looked at her, unsure how to speak. She pressed the cloth into his palm. It was warm from her hands. "I reckon you earned it," she said. He stared at the small gift, the threads uneven but full of care. "So I did take something after all," he murmured. Their eyes met across the firelight, no words left between them, only a quiet promise neither dared break. Outside, the crickets began their song, and the night settled gentle around the house. If love was the price of mercy, would you pay it? Their story isn't over yet. Stick with us. A year passed like rain through soil, quietly but with purpose. Spring came soft to the ridge, laying green across the hills where the frost once ruled. The Boone fields bloomed again, barley rising strong, beans threading up poles, the air rich with the scent of life returning. Elias walked the rows at dawn, boots wet with dew. His hands no longer carried a gun or deed, just a hoe worn smooth by work. From the porch, Clara watched him, the morning light tracing gold along her hair. There was peace in the rhythm of his steps, the same peace that had finally found its way into her father's eyes. Silas Boone sat in his chair beneath the old willow, wrapped in a quilt. He no longer spoke much, but he smiled often, especially when Clara and Elias laughed together across the field. Sometimes he'd lift a trembling hand and tip his hat toward the sky, as if thanking it for one more day. Children from the valley came to learn letters under the shade of the porch. Clara had started teaching them from her mother's worn Bible, her voice calm, steady, patient. The sound of their laughter carried through the open windows, mixing with the clatter of Elias's hammer mending the barn. The ridge that once divided them now held their lives together. There was no line between his land and hers anymore, just soil, sun, and the slow, honest work of keeping something alive. And when the wind moved through the barley, it sounded like forgiveness. The sun slipped low over the Montana ridge, turning the sky into a river of gold and fire. The wind moved gently through the barley, bending each stalk like it was bowing to the evening. Elias stood beside Clara on the porch, sleeves rolled, hands rough with honest work. Her fingers brushed his, soft and sure, the kind of touch that needed no words. Down by the willow, Silas Boone rested beneath a simple wooden cross, the earth still fresh, but the grass already taking hold. A single ribbon of green cloth, her mother's, fluttered there in the breeze. From the road below, a stranger on horseback slowed his mount, tipping his hat toward the cabin. "Who owns that land up there?" he called. An old rancher passing by smiled and pointed. "That land?" he said. It belongs to the ones who chose each other." The rider nodded, then disappeared into the trail dust, leaving the quiet valley behind. Clara leaned her head against Elias's shoulder. "It's strange," she whispered. "You came here with paper to claim the land, and it's the land that claimed us." Elias smiled faintly, eyes on the horizon. "Guess some things can't be bought, only earned." The sky dimmed to violet, and the wind carried the scent of rain and earth, the same scent that had met him on the day he first rode into the fog, only now it smelled like home. And as night settled over Hart Ridge, the land belonged not to law or ink, but to love, forever.
Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. We'll be dropping brand new powerful stories every single day. See you on the next one.